Jake Murphy wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked his rifle for the third time that morning. The weapon was clean and ready, just like always, but checking it had become a habit that kept his hands busy when his mind started to wander. Around him, the other Marines of Delta Company were doing their own morning routines on the dusty surface of New Colorado. Some cleaned their gear, others talked quietly among themselves, and a few stared off into the red horizon where the alien ships had been spotted the day before. New Colorado was not much to look at. The planet had red dirt that got into everything, scraggly plants that barely grew, and a sun that felt too hot during the day and too cold at night. The human colony had been here for 8 years now, trying to turn this rocky world into something that could support families and farms. They had succeeded mostly, building small towns connected by rough roads and setting up mining operations that pulled valuable metals from the ground. It was a quiet place where people worked hard and hoped for better days. That quiet had been broken 3 days ago when the Vorthan ships arrived in the system. The aliens had not attacked right away, but their massive vessels hung in space like dark clouds promising a storm. Everyone on New Colorado knew what Vorthans meant when they came calling. They wanted the planet, and they would take it by force if the humans refused to leave. Jake had been on New Colorado for 6 months now, assigned to help protect the colony from raiders and hostile wildlife. Before that, he had served on various ships and stations across human space, always moving from one assignment to another. He never talked much about his previous service, and the other Marines had stopped asking. Some soldiers liked to tell stories about their battles and adventures, but Jake Murphy was not one of them. He did his job, followed orders, and kept to himself. The communication center crackled to life, drawing everyone's attention. Captain Lisa Hayes emerged from the small building that served as their command post, her face grim. She was a tough woman who had earned the respect of every Marine under her command through fair treatment and smart decisions. When she looked worried, everyone else started to worry too. "Listen up, people," Hayes called out, and the Marines gathered around her. "The Vorthans just sent us a message. They want to talk." Corporal Danny Wright, a young Marine from Texas, raised his hand. "Talk about what, Captain?" Hayes looked at the data pad in her hands. "They want us to surrender the colony peacefully. In exchange, they promise to allow the civilians to evacuate safely." She paused, reading more of the message. "If we refuse, they will take the planet by force." The Marines exchanged glances. Everyone knew that Vorthans did not make idle threats. Their empire had been expanding across this region of space for years, taking world after world. Sometimes they negotiated, sometimes they just attacked, but they always got what they wanted in the end. The human military was spread thin trying to protect dozens of colonies, and New Colorado was far from the main fleet bases. "How long do we have to decide?" asked Sergeant Kelly Martinez, a veteran with 20 years of service. 12 hours, Hayes replied. "But there's more. They want to follow their traditional customs. They're offering single combat between champions. If we win, they leave us alone. If they win, we surrender without a fight." Jake felt something cold in his stomach. He had heard about Vorthan combat traditions during his training years ago. The aliens were proud warriors who believed that individual skill in battle determined the worth of entire armies. They were big, strong, and had been fighting for thousands of years. Their champions were legendary across the galaxy for their skill and brutality. "Who would we send?" Wright asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. Hayes shook her head. "That's the problem. Our orders are to hold this position, but we don't have anyone who could match a Vorthon champion. These aliens are 9 feet tall, covered in natural armor, and trained from birth to fight. Even our best Marines would be at a serious disadvantage. The group fell silent. Jake looked around at his fellow soldiers. They were good people and decent fighters, but none of them were superhuman. Martinez was tough and experienced, but she was past her prime. Wright was young and enthusiastic, but he had never faced anything like a Vorthon warrior. The other Marines were similar, capable soldiers who had signed up to protect colonies, not to fight alien champions in single combat. Jake found himself thinking about the civilians in the nearby settlements, families with children who had come to New Colorado looking for a better life, farmers and miners who worked hard every day to build something worth having. If the Marines refused the challenge, those people would be caught in the middle when the Vorthans attacked. The aliens might keep their promise to let the civilians evacuate, but Jake had seen what happened when colonies fell to hostile forces. Not everyone made it out alive. "I'll do it," Jake said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. For a moment, nobody spoke. "What did you say, Murphy?" Hayes asked. Jake cleared his throat and spoke louder. "I said I'll do it, Captain. I'll fight. Their champion." Wright laughed nervously. "Come on, Jake, you're a good Marine, but you're not exactly championship material. No offense." "None taken," Jake replied. He understood why Wright would think that. Jake was average height for a human, maybe 5 feet 10 inches tall. He was in good shape, but not unusually muscular. He had brown hair that was starting to show some gray, and quiet brown eyes that rarely showed much emotion. At 35 years old, he was neither the youngest nor the oldest Marine in the unit. Nothing about him screamed warrior champion, but Jake knew something the others did not. He knew what his service record actually contained, and he knew what he had done during his years in the human military. He had never talked about it because talking about it seemed wrong somehow. The numbers were too big, and the reality of what they meant was too heavy to share in casual conversation. Hayes studied Jake's face. "Murphy, I appreciate the offer, but this isn't a suicide mission I can just hand out. Do you have any experience with single combat? Any special training?" Jake nodded slowly. "Some, Captain. I've had training." "What kind of training?" Jake hesitated. The truth was complicated, and he was not sure how much he should reveal. "Various kinds, ma'am. Close quarters combat, weapons training, tactical operations. I've seen combat before." Hayes frowned. She had read Jake's file when he joined her unit, but it was strangely sparse on details. His previous assignments were listed, but the specific operations and actions were mostly classified or redacted. That was not unusual for Marines who had served in special operations or sensitive missions, but it made it hard to judge his actual capabilities. "I need to think about this," Hayes said finally. "In the meantime, everyone should prepare for the possibility that we'll be fighting a defensive action. Check your equipment, review the defense plans, and get some rest. We'll make a decision in a few hours." As the group dispersed, Jake remained behind. Hayes noticed and walked over to him. "Murphy, I need to ask you something directly. Do you really think you can fight a Vorthan champion and win?" Jake looked out at the red horizon where the alien ships waited. "I think I can try, Captain. And I think that might be enough." Hayes studied his calm expression and wondered what secrets Jake Murphy was keeping about his past. The Vorthan ship descended through the atmosphere of New Colorado like a dark metal mountain coming to rest on the planet's surface. Its hull was black with silver markings that caught the sunlight and threw it back in sharp flashes. The ship was easily 3 times larger than any human vessel Jake had ever seen up close, and its design spoke of a species that built things to intimidate as much as to function. Weapon ports lined its sides like angry eyes, and the landing legs that extended from its belly looked more like the claws of some massive predator. Jake stood with the other Marines at the edge of the landing zone that had been designated for the challenge. Captain Hayes had spent hours on communications with the Vorthan fleet, working out the details of the combat ritual. The aliens took their traditions very seriously, and every aspect of the challenge had specific rules that could not be broken. The location had to be neutral ground with good visibility. Both fighters had to declare their combat records publicly. The weapons could be personal choice, but both sides had to agree they were fair. Most importantly, the combat had to be observed by representatives of both species to ensure honor was maintained. The ship's landing ramp lowered with a mechanical whine that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Jake felt the vibration in his boots and wondered if it was intentional. Another way for the Vorthons to remind everyone how powerful they were. Steam hissed from the ship's systems as the ramp touched the red dirt of New Colorado. What emerged from the ship made several of the younger Marines take involuntary steps backward. The Vorthon champion was everything the stories had said and more. He stood easily 9 feet tall, his body covered in what looked like natural armor plating that had been polished to a dark shine. His arms were thick as tree trunks and ended in hands that could probably crush a human skull without effort. His head was elongated and angular, with eyes that burned like yellow fire and a mouth full of teeth designed for tearing flesh. Behind the champion came a group of smaller Vorthans who carried recording devices and ceremonial banners. These were the observers who would document the combat for their empire's historical records. They moved with the precise coordination of a military unit, setting up their equipment in a pattern that had probably been used for thousands of years. The champion wore armor that seemed to be a combination of advanced technology and traditional craftsmanship. Plates of metal covered his vital areas while leaving his joints free for movement. Across his back were strapped 2 massive weapons, a plasma rifle that glowed with contained energy, and a melee weapon that looked like a cross between a sword and an axe. The weapon's blade was easily 4 feet long and etched with symbols that probably represented previous victories. Captain Hayes stepped forward to meet the Vorthon delegation. She had put on her dress uniform for the occasion, understanding that first impressions mattered to a species that valued ceremony. The ranking Vorthon observer was smaller than the champion, but still towered over Hayes. His armor was more ornate, covered in markings that indicated high rank within their military hierarchy. "I am War Commander Thexnall of the Vorthon 3rd Expansion Fleet," the observer announced in heavily accented but understandable English. "I serve as witness to this combat challenge as decreed by ancient law. Present your champion so that honor records may be verified." Hayes gestured toward Jake, who stepped forward. Next to the massive aliens, he looked even more ordinary than usual. His standard Marine uniform was clean and pressed, but it was clearly the clothing of a common soldier rather than a great warrior. His weapons were regulation issue, a plasma rifle and a combat knife that looked tiny compared to the Vorthan champion's armaments. The champion studied Jake with obvious confusion. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, like distant thunder. "I am Warcast Zethkar, victor of the Crimson Worlds, slayer of the Tethys Rebellion, champion of 1,000 battles." This small human is your greatest warrior? Hayes kept her voice steady despite the intimidating presence of the aliens. This is Lieutenant Jake Murphy, our chosen champion. Zethkar made a sound that might have been laughter. Very well. Let us proceed with the honor declarations, so this disappointment may be concluded quickly. He turned to address both the human and Vorthon observers. As tradition demands, each warrior must declare their combat record so that the spirits of the fallen may witness this battle. I shall begin. The champion straightened to his full height and began to speak in a formal tone. I am Zethkar of the War caste, born in battle and raised for glory. I have fought across 17 star systems and walked on 43 worlds in the name of the Vorthan Empire. My blade has tasted the blood of enemies from dozen species. I have led warriors into battle and stood alone against overwhelming odds. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the assembled crowd. In single combat, I have defeated 97 champions of other species. In battle, I have personally killed 1,247 enemies. Each death was honorable, each victory earned through strength and skill. I am Zethkar the Destroyer, and my name will be remembered when this world is dust. The Vorthan observers made approving sounds, clearly impressed by their champion's record. Even the human Marines looked nervous. Over 1,200 personal kills was a staggering number, representing years of constant warfare across multiple conflicts. War Commander Thexnall turned to Jake. Human champion, present your combat record for verification. Jake took a deep breath. He had been dreading this moment, not because he was afraid of the fight, but because of what the numbers meant. My name is Jake Murphy. I've served in the human military for 17 years across various assignments and conflicts. He paused, looking at the ground for a moment before meeting Zethkar's burning gaze. My confirmed kill count is 2,300,712. For several seconds, nobody moved or spoke. The Vorthon translation devices made confused electronic noises as they tried to process what they had heard. Finally, Thexnall stepped forward, his expression incredulous. There has been an error in translation. Repeat your claim, human. Jake's voice was steady and quiet. 2,300,712 confirmed kills. Zethkar roared in fury, his massive fists clenching. Lies. Deception. No single warrior could achieve such numbers. You mock our sacred traditions with this falsehood. The other Vorthon observers began making angry sounds, their weapons starting to power up. The situation was rapidly escalating toward violence. And Captain Hayes stepped forward quickly. The claim is accurate, she said loudly. We have documentation to prove it. Thexnall's eyes narrowed. Present this documentation immediately, or we will consider this challenge void and begin orbital bombardment. Hayes pulled out a data pad and connected it to a portable transmitter. I'm uploading Lieutenant Murphy's complete service record to your ships for verification. You'll find that every claim is documented and verified by military command. Jake watched the aliens' faces as they received and processed his file. He knew what they would find. Assignment records that showed his service aboard various vessels and installations, training records that demonstrated his qualifications with multiple weapon systems, and most importantly, the battle reports from his time aboard the UHS Ranger during the Zephyrian War. The war commander's expression changed from anger to confusion to something approaching awe as he read through the data. He spoke rapidly to the other observers in their own language, pointing At sections of the file and gesturing emphatically, Zethkar demanded to know what was being discussed. When Thexnal explained, the champion's rage returned even stronger than before. Ship weapons do not count as personal combat, Zethkar declared. Any weakling can press a button and fire a cannon. True warriors face their enemies with blade and courage, not hiding behind technology like cowards. Jake finally spoke up. The file contains more than just ship actions. Check the ground combat records from the Kepler Station incident, the boarding actions during the Merchant War, and the counterinsurgency operations on Helios Prime. Those were all personal combat with small arms and hand weapons. Thexnal scrolled. Through more of the file, his expression growing more troubled. These numbers, even discounting the ship-based actions, your personal combat kills number in the tens of thousands. How is this possible for a human? Jake shrugged. I've been at war for a long time, and I'm good at my job. The simple statement hung in the air like a challenge. Zethkar studied this unremarkable human, who claimed to have killed more enemies than entire Vorthan armies. Everything about Jake Murphy seemed ordinary except for the numbers in his file, numbers so large they seemed impossible. Very well, Zethkar said finally. If these records are true, then you are worthy of honorable combat. But know this, human. All your previous kills mean nothing if you cannot defeat me face to face. I have never lost a personal challenge, and I will not start today. Jake nodded respectfully. I understand. When do we begin? The Vorthan observers spent the next hour examining Jake's service record with increasing fascination and disbelief. They had transmitted the files to their fleet commanders, who were now demanding detailed explanations for numbers that seemed to defy reality. War Commander Thexnal paced back and forth like a caged predator, occasionally stopping to fire rapid questions at Captain Hayes about human military procedures and combat doctrine. Jake sat on a supply crate near the landing zone, methodically, cleaning his rifle while the aliens debated. He could hear their heated discussions even though they spoke in their own language. The tone was unmistakable, confusion mixed with anger, and a growing sense that they were dealing with something they did not understand. Several times, one of the observers would point at him and make gestures that clearly indicated disbelief. Captain Hayes approached and sat down beside him. You want to tell me what really happened during the Zephyrian War? Jake continued working on his weapon. It's all in the files, Captain. The files say you served as a gunner aboard the UHS Ranger during the Battle of Titan's Gate. They say you were responsible for 17 confirmed ship kills during that engagement. What they don't explain is how that translates to over 2 million individual deaths. Jake set down his cleaning cloth and looked at her. The Zephyrians use massive colony ships as their primary battle platforms. Each ship carried between 50,000 and 200,000 beings, warriors, support personnel, families, entire communities. When we destroyed those ships, everyone aboard died. Hayes felt a chill run down her spine. You're talking about civilian casualties. I'm talking about legitimate military targets, Jake corrected. The Zephyrians don't separate military and civilian populations the way humans do. Their entire society is organized around warfare. Every adult is a warrior. Every child is a warrior in training. Their colony ships were armed battle platforms carrying invasion forces. But still, Jake's voice remained calm and matter-of-fact. During the Battle of Titan's Gate, I was the primary gunner on the Ranger's main particle cannon. The weapon system was my responsibility. Over the course of 8 hours of combat, I targeted and destroyed 17 enemy vessels. The smallest carried 60,000 Zephyrians. The largest carried over 200,000. Hayes tried to imagine the scale of destruction he was describing. How do you live with numbers like that? The same way any soldier lives with doing their job, Jake replied. The Zephyrians were invading human colonies, killing entire populations, taking worlds that didn't belong to them. If I hadn't destroyed those ships, they would have continued on to attack civilian targets. Every Zephyrian who died meant human lives saved. The conversation was interrupted by Zethkar's roar of frustration. The champion had apparently reached the end of his patience with the ongoing verification process. He strode over to where Jake and Hayes were sitting, his massive form casting a shadow over them. "Enough delays," Zethkar declared. "I have heard enough about your ship weapons and long-range cowardice. You claim to be a warrior, but you fight from a distance like a weakling who fears honorable combat. When we fight, it will be face to face, weapon to weapon, as true warriors should." Jake stood up, shouldering his rifle. "I understand your traditions, but you should understand something about human warfare. We don't fight for honor or glory. We fight to win. Winning without honor is meaningless," Zethkar replied. "Losing with honor is still losing," Jake countered. War Commander Thexnall approached the group, carrying a datapad displaying Jake's complete service record. His expression was troubled as he studied the information. "Human champion. I must ask for clarification about several aspects of your combat history. Beyond the ship-based actions, your record shows participation in ground combat operations, special forces missions, and what your military calls asymmetric warfare. Explain these terms." Jake considered how to explain human military doctrine to aliens who apparently fought according to ancient honor codes. Asymmetric warfare means using tactics and strategies that your enemy doesn't expect or can't counter effectively. It means adapting to circumstances instead of following rigid traditions. "Give examples," Thexnall demanded. "During the counterinsurgency, on Helios Prime, I spent 6 months tracking rebel leaders through urban environments. The mission required patience, stealth, and precision shooting. I eliminated 47 high-value targets using sniper tactics." Jake paused, remembering those long, difficult months. "Each shot was taken from a distance of over 1 kilometer. The targets never saw me coming." Zethkar made a disgusted sound. "Cowardly assassination, not honorable combat." "Effective elimination of enemy leadership," Jake corrected. "The rebellion collapsed within 2 weeks after we removed their command structure." Thexnall scrolled through more of the file. "This record mentions boarding actions during the Merchant War. Explain these operations." "Hostile forces were using captured civilian vessels as mobile bases for piracy operations. Our unit was tasked with retaking the ships and eliminating the pirates. This required close-quarters combat in confined spaces, corridors, cargo holds, engineering sections." Jake's voice remained steady as he described actions that had required tremendous skill and courage. "Over 18 months, we cleared 23 captured vessels. I personally accounted for 137 enemy combatants during those operations." "Face-to-face combat," Zethkar noted with grudging approval. "This at least shows some warrior spirit." "It shows tactical flexibility," Jake replied. "Sometimes the mission requires long-range precision. Sometimes it requires close combat. A good soldier adapts to whatever the situation demands." Captain Hayes was beginning to understand why Jake's service record had so many classified sections. The man had apparently been involved in some of the most dangerous and sensitive military operations of the past 2 decades. "Jake, what about the Special Forces training mentioned in your file?" cross-training with various elite units, Jake explained. Demolitions, infiltration, survival techniques, advanced weapon systems, zero-gravity combat, hostile environment. Operations. The military wanted personnel who could handle any type of mission in any type of conditions. Thexana was studying the psychological evaluation sections of Jake's file. Your own commanders describe you as unusually adaptable and capable of extreme violence when necessary. They also note that you show no signs of combat stress or psychological trauma despite extensive exposure to warfare. How is this possible? Jake shrugged. Some people are built for this kind of work. I don't enjoy killing, but I don't lose sleep over it either. When someone needs to be stopped, I stop them. When something needs to be destroyed, I destroy it. It's just work. The casual way he spoke about violence and death clearly disturbed the Vorthon observers. They were warriors themselves, but they fought according to codes of honor that gave meaning and structure to combat. Jake's approach seemed coldly pragmatic in comparison. There is something else, Thexanal said, his voice thoughtful. Your file mentions that you have been recommended for command positions multiple times, but you have always declined promotion beyond lieutenant rank. Why? I'm good at being a soldier, Jake replied. I'm not sure I'd be good at being an officer. Commanding troops requires different skills than fighting battles. Zethkar studied Jake with new interest. You choose to remain a simple warrior rather than seek power and status? I choose to do what I'm good at, Jake said simply. The champion was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. In Vorthon society, advancement through the ranks was a mark of honor and achievement. The idea of deliberately avoiding promotion was almost incomprehensible. Very well, Zethkar said finally. Your record shows that you are indeed a warrior, even if your methods are strange to us. You have faced enemies in direct combat and emerged victorious. You have killed on a scale that few beings in the galaxy could match. I will grant you the honor of facing me in single combat. He paused, his burning eyes fixed on Jake's calm expression. But understand this, human. All your previous victories mean nothing now. In single combat, there is nowhere to hide, no long-range weapons to save you, no tactics to compensate for weakness. It will be strength against strength, skill against skill, warrior against warrior. Jake nodded respectfully. I understand the terms. When do we begin? At sunset, Zethkar declared. As tradition demands, the spirits of the dead will witness our combat as the day gives way to night. As the Vorthon champion walked away to prepare for battle, Captain Hayes grabbed Jake's arm. Are you sure about this? That thing is twice your size and has been training for combat since birth. Jake looked at the alien ship looming over the landing zone, then at the worried faces of his fellow Marines. Captain, I've been at war for 17 years. I've faced impossible odds before and found ways to survive. Maybe size and strength aren't the only things that matter in a fight. Hayes wanted to argue, but something in Jake's quiet confidence made her pause. She had read his file now, seen the incredible record of survival and victory that he had compiled across multiple conflicts. Perhaps there was more to this unremarkable Marine than anyone had realized. The sunset on New Colorado painted the sky in shades of orange and red that reflected off the hull of the Vorthon ship like captured fire. Jake stood in the center of the designated combat zone, a flat area of hard-packed dirt roughly 50 meters across. The Vorthon observers had marked the boundaries with energy posts that glowed with soft blue light, creating an arena that satisfied their ancient traditions. Zethkar emerged from his ship wearing different armor than before. This set was clearly ceremonial, decorated with symbols and markings that probably told the story of his previous victories. The metal was polished to mirror brightness, and each piece was crafted with an artistic attention to detail that spoke of a culture that treated warfare as both art and religion. His weapons were equally impressive. The massive sword axe now seemed to glow with its own inner light, and the plasma rifle hummed with barely contained energy. Jake wore his standard combat gear with a few modifications. He had selected his weapons carefully from the Marine Armory, a pulse rifle with extended range capability, a combat shotgun for close quarters work, his regulation sidearm, and a combat knife that had been with him for over a decade. Compared to the alien champion's ornate equipment, his gear looked utilitarian and plain, but every piece had been tested in actual combat situations. War Commander Thexnall stood at the edge of the arena with the other Vorthon observers. Their recording equipment captured every detail of the preparations, documenting the event for their empire's historical archives. Captain Hayes and the human Marines occupied the opposite side of the arena, their expressions showing a mixture of hope and worry. "Before combat begins," Thexanal announced, "there is a matter that requires resolution. The Vorthan High Command has reviewed the human champion's combat record and raised questions about the nature of his claimed victories." Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. He had been expecting this challenge to his credentials. Thexnal continued, "Fleet Admiral Corex Thule wishes to know whether victories achieved through ship weapons, long-range sniping, and technological advantages should be considered equivalent to personal combat prowess. There is debate among our war leaders about whether such methods demonstrate true warrior skill." Zethkar stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly across the arena. "I have considered this question carefully. The human's methods are strange, to us, but his results cannot be denied. He has faced enemies and emerged victorious thousands of times. Whether he killed them with blade or cannon, whether he faced them at arm's length or across vast distances, he has proven himself in battle." The champion paused, studying Jake's calm expression. "However, there is a difference between being an effective killer and being a true warrior. Tonight we will discover which category this human belongs to." Jake appreciated the alien's honesty, even if it came with obvious condescension. "I respect your traditions, Zethkar, but I think you're missing something important about human warfare." "Explain," the champion demanded. "You treat combat as a test of individual honor and skill. We treat it as a problem to be solved. You fight to prove your worth. We fight to achieve objectives. You see victory through strength and courage. We see victory through whatever means necessary." Zethkar's eyes narrowed. "You speak as if warfare is merely a technical challenge rather than a sacred trial." "That's exactly what I'm saying," Jake replied. "When human colonies are under attack, we don't care about honor or tradition. We care about protecting our people and defeating our enemies. If that means using overwhelming firepower, we use overwhelming firepower. If it means fighting dirty, we fight dirty. If it means sacrificing personal glory for mission success, we sacrifice personal glory." The Vorthon observers exchanged troubled glances. This philosophical difference clearly disturbed them on a fundamental level. Thexnall spoke up. "Your attitude explains much about human military success, but it also raises disturbing questions about your species' moral character. How can you claim to be honorable warriors if you abandon all principles of fair combat?" Captain Hayes stepped forward. "With respect, War Commander, Our principles are different from yours. We believe that the greatest honor comes from protecting innocent lives and achieving victory with minimal casualties on our own side. If superior tactics and technology can end a war quickly and save lives, then using them is the moral choice. But where is the test of personal courage? Zethkar asked. Where is the proof of individual worth? Any coward can hide behind powerful weapons and claim victory. Jake shook his head. You're assuming that using superior weapons makes someone a coward. During the Battle of Titan's Gate, I sat at my gun station for 8 hours while enemy fire hammered our ship. The hull was breached in 3 places, life support was failing, and we lost 17 crew members before the battle ended. I stayed at my post and kept firing because that's what the mission required. He paused, remembering the heat and smoke and the screaming of damaged equipment. Every time I pulled the trigger, I knew I was ending thousands of lives. Every shot was a conscious decision to kill rather than be killed. If you think that doesn't require courage, you've never been in that situation. Zethkar was quiet for a moment, considering Jake's words. You describe a different kind of warfare than we practice, but I begin to understand that it requires its own form of courage. Still, tonight we fight according to our traditions. No ship weapons, no long range, advantages, no technological superiority. Just 2 warriors facing each other with personal weapons. I understand, Jake said, and I accept those terms. Then let us begin, Thexanel declared. Combat will continue until one warrior yields or is unable to continue. Victory through death or surrender. These are the only acceptable conclusions. The 2 combatants moved to opposite sides of the arena. Jake checked his weapons one final time, running through tactical considerations in his mind. Zethkar was bigger, stronger, and had longer reach with his massive sword axe. The alien's natural armor would provide protection against small arms. Fire and his reflexes were probably faster than any human could match. In a direct confrontation, Jake would be at a severe disadvantage, but Jake had not survived 17 years of warfare by fighting fair. He studied the arena, noting the placement of the boundary markers, the texture of the ground, and the way the fading light created shadows that could provide concealment. The Vorthons expected an honorable duel between champions. Jake was planning a tactical engagement where every advantage would be exploited. Zethkar raised his massive weapon and bellowed a war cry that echoed across the desert. The sound was primal and terrifying, designed to intimidate enemies and inspire allies. When the echo faded, he spoke in a formal tone that carried the weight of ancient tradition. I am Zethkar of the Warcast, and I call upon the spirits of my ancestors to witness this combat. May my blade strike true, and my courage never fail. Jake simply raised his rifle and spoke quietly. I am Jake Murphy, United Colonial Marines, and I'm here to do my job. The contrast between the 2 declarations was stark. Zethkar's words invoked honor, tradition, and supernatural support. Jake's words were simple and practical, focused on duty rather than glory. Thexanel raised his hand, preparing to signal the start of combat. Both warriors tensed, ready to begin a battle that would determine the fate of New Colorado and possibly reveal fundamental truths about the nature of warfare itself. Begin, the war commander declared, and dropped his hand. Zethkar charged forward with surprising speed for something so large, his sword axe raised high above his head. His strategy was clear. Close the distance quickly and use his superior size and strength to overwhelm his opponent before Jake could bring his ranged weapons to bear effectively. Jake did not meet the charge head-on. Instead, he moved laterally, using his smaller size and human agility to stay ahead of the alien's advance while firing controlled bursts from his pulse rifle. The energy bolts struck Zethkar's armor and scorched the metal, but did not penetrate. The champion adjusted his course and continued his relentless pursuit. The battle had begun, and both fighters were already learning that this combat would be unlike anything either of them had experienced before. The arena became a deadly dance between two completely different philosophies of combat. Zethkar pursued Jake with relentless determination, his massive sword axe cleaving through the air where the human had been moments before. The alien champion fought with the confidence of someone who had never lost a personal duel, his movements flowing with practiced precision that spoke of decades of training in traditional combat forms. Jake fought like a survivor. He used every piece of cover the arena provided, rolling behind the boundary markers when Zethkar's plasma rifle sent superheated bolts scorching past his head. He fired in controlled bursts, conserving ammunition while searching for weak points in the alien's armor. When his pulse rifle proved ineffective against Zethkar's heavy protection, he switched to his shotgun and aimed for joints and gaps in the plating. The Vorthon observers watched with growing confusion. This was not the type of combat they expected from a formal challenge. Jake refused to engage in the direct weapon-to-weapon confrontation that their traditions demanded. Instead, he treated the fight as a tactical problem, using mobility and terrain to offset his disadvantages. "Stand and fight like a warrior," Zethkar roared as Jake evaded another crushing blow from the sword axe. "Stop running and face me with honor." Jake fired 3 rounds from his shotgun at point-blank range, the impacts staggering the massive alien. "I am fighting, just not the way you want me to." Zethkar's plasma rifle hummed as it charged for another shot. Jake dove sideways as the energy bolt scorched the ground where he had been standing. The heat was intense enough to turn sand into glass, and Jake realized that a direct hit would be fatal regardless of his body armor. But Jake had noticed something during their exchanges. Zethkar's plasma rifle required several seconds to recharge between shots, creating windows of opportunity that could be exploited. The alien's sword axe was devastatingly effective at close range, but its size and weight made it slow to recover after missed swings. Most importantly, Zethkar fought according to patterns that had been drilled into him through years of training, patterns that Jake could predict and counter. Jake's next move surprised everyone watching. Instead of continuing to evade, he charged directly at Zethkar while the alien was recovering from a missed overhead swing. The champion tried to bring his weapon around for a defensive strike, but Jake slid under the blade and came up inside the alien's reach. At point-blank range, he emptied his shotgun into the joint where Zethkar's arm connected to his torso. The alien roared in pain as the impacts cracked his armor plating. Jake rolled away before Zethkar could grab him, but he had proven that the champion was not invulnerable. Dark fluid that might have been blood leaked from the damaged armor. War Commander Thexnal leaned forward, his expression intense. "Impossible. No warrior has ever penetrated Zethkar's armor in single combat." Captain Hayes felt a surge of hope. "Jake's not fighting a single combat. He's fighting a war." The distinction was becoming clear to the Vorthon observers. They had expected a traditional duel where both fighters tested their skills according to established rules. Jake was treating the encounter as a battlefield engagement where only results mattered. He used every advantage available, exploited every weakness he could find, and adapted his tactics based on what the situation required. Zethkar was beginning to understand that he faced an opponent unlike any he had encountered before. The humans. Methods were unorthodox and seemingly dishonorable. but they were undeniably effective. For the first time in his career as a champion, Zethkar found himself struggling to maintain the initiative. "You fight without honor," Zethkar declared as he switched to his plasma rifle for a sustained assault. "You use coward's tactics and avoid direct confrontation." Jake took cover behind one of the boundary markers as energy bolts superheated the air around him. "I fight to win. That's what humans do. We find ways to win even when we're outmatched." "Winning without honor is meaningless," Zethkar replied, but there was less conviction in his voice than before. "Tell that to the families on New Colorado, who get to live because I won this fight." Jake's words struck home. The alien champion had been so focused on the ritual aspects of combat that he had almost forgotten what was at stake. This was not just a test of personal skill, it was a battle for the fate of an entire colony. Jake switched back to his pulse rifle and began firing from a new angle, forcing Zethkar to pivot and exposing different sections of his armor. The human had identified the pattern now. Fire several shots to force the alien to respond, then move to a new position before the return fire could be accurately targeted. It was a strategy that required patience and precise timing, but it was gradually wearing down the champion's defenses. Zethkar's armor now showed damage in multiple locations. The dark fluid that served as his blood had begun pooling on the arena floor. His movements were becoming slower and less coordinated as the accumulated injuries took their toll. For the first time in his life, he faced the possibility of defeat in single combat. "How?" Zethkar demanded as he struggled to target the constantly moving human. "How does a small, weak creature like you defeat a warrior of my caliber?" Jake paused his assault long enough to answer. "Because I don't see you as a warrior to be honored. I see you as a problem to be solved, and humans are very good at solving problems." The statement revealed the fundamental difference between their species' approaches to conflict. Vortans fought to prove their worth according to ancient codes. Humans fought to achieve objectives through whatever means necessary. It was the difference between viewing warfare as a sacred ritual and viewing it as an engineering challenge. Thexanol turned to his fellow observers. "We must report this to the Fleet Command immediately. The implications are enormous." "What implications?" one of the other Vorthons asked. "Don't you see? This human represents how his entire species approaches warfare. They don't fight for honor or glory. They fight for results. They don't follow traditions. They adapt to circumstances. They don't seek fair contests. They seek decisive victories." The war commander's voice carried a note of concern that bordered on fear. "If every human soldier thinks like this one, if their entire military doctrine is based on practical effectiveness rather than honorable combat, then we have gravely underestimated them as opponents. In the arena, the battle was reaching its conclusion." Zethkar was now severely wounded and struggling to maintain his defensive posture. Jake had methodically exploited every weakness in the alien's armor and fighting style, turning what should have been an impossible challenge into a winnable engagement through superior tactics and adaptability. The champion made one final, desperate charge, hoping to close the distance and bring his superior physical strength to bear. Jake waited until the last possible moment, then stepped aside and fired his remaining shotgun rounds into the back of Zethkar's knee joint. The alien crashed to the ground, his leg unable to support his massive weight. Jake approached carefully, his rifle trained on the fallen champion. Zethkar tried to raise his sword axe but lacked the leverage to make an effective attack from his prone position. "Yield," Jake said quietly. "You fought with honor, but the fight is over." Zethkar looked up at this unremarkable human who had accomplished the impossible. His yellow eyes burned with a mixture of pain, respect, and something that might have been fear. "I yield," the champion said finally. "The victory is yours." The Vorthan observers stood in stunned silence as Jake helped Zethkar to his feet. The implications of what they had witnessed were still sinking in. A species that approached warfare as a technical problem rather than a test of honor could be far more dangerous than any enemy they had previously faced. War Commander Thexnall activated his communication system to contact the fleet. "Admiral, I recommend immediate withdrawal from this system. The humans represent a type of opponent we are not prepared to face." Within hours, the Vorthon fleet had departed New Colorado's orbit. Word of the battle spread throughout their empire and beyond, carrying with it a new understanding of human capabilities. The galaxy had learned that humanity did not just produce individual warriors. They had created an entire species of problem solvers who viewed warfare itself as just another challenge to be overcome through intelligence, adaptability, and sheer determination. Jake Murphy returned to his quiet service, but his legend spread through known space as both a warning and a promise. The unremarkable Marine with millions of kills had shown the galaxy that humans did not fight wars. They solved them, and that made all the difference.